Hello and welcome to learning about the historical method and historiography. We are taking a look into the topic called research. In research, we are looking into synthetic operations. So, previous lessons we had covered analytical operations. In analytical operations, we are checking the genuineness of all the documents and historical sources to get our research done. So, you as a researcher has taken a lot of sources, inscriptions, coins. You have studied, you have collected a lot of sources. In analytical operations, you check its genuineness. And once you feel that the source is genuine and you can use it for your research, the next step is synthetic operations. So what do you do in synthetic operations? So keep this picture in mind. You have a list of sheets which you have organized it well. So this is what synthetic operations means, organizing. So let's take a bit more into details of what is synthetic operation. So, synthetic operation is nothing but the second part of historical methodology. The first part was analytical operations, where you check the genuineness of the document. You did external criticism and internal criticism. In external criticism, you check the author, time, and place of all the sources, and in internal criticism, you check the condition with which the document was produced and also the author's mind and mentality. Okay, now we are looking into synthetic operations, which is nothing but joining, arranging, explaining all the sources. Okay, to give you a bit more information on this. So now you have, let us say you have selected a topic on Aurangzeb. So you have studied, you have in your house or in your library or in your college, you have a list of sources with you. Like for example, it could be Marathas. Information on Aurangzeb. It could be some collection of Arabic sources. It could be even written in Kannada, or it could be about Mysore explanations on Aurangzeb. So you have a lot of sources. You have already checked its genuineness, and you want to use all of this in your research. So what do you do now? There's a lot of data with you. So you should start arranging them, sorting them, so that you can write your research and thesis in a meaningful and interesting way. Okay, so you will try to take all the research data and facts and you will try to arrange them into a whole story. You will try to fill up the gaps. Okay, so synthetic operations uses a lot of techniques. It can use descriptive technique, it uses psychology, it can use sociology and other sciences. Okay, so for example, let's talk about Aurangzeb. You don't know the period of Aurangzeb, but when you start reading sources, you will start getting a picture of Aurangzeb, the way he dealt with Rajputs, the way he dealt with the Deccan Wars, the way he dealt with Shivaji, etc. So slowly you will build a mental imagination of all the facts related to Aurangzeb. Okay. Initially, the mental images that mental picture that you are getting in your mind will not be correct. But as you start reading, as you start collecting all the sources, you will start uh, eliminating one by one all the false statements, and you'll only take what is required for your research. So you'll start building a correct picture of Aurangzeb. For that, you will may even observe today's events, like what is happening in the modern era. So, if you are unsure about what's happening during the wars of Aurangzeb, you may or strategies used in Aurangzeb's war, you may find similarity in 19th century or 20th century, and you will try to make a mental imagination as to what might have happened so that you can write your thesis in a better way. So synthetic operations involves not only joining arranging data but also mental imaginary. Okay, so what is the importance of synthetic operations? So obviously, the first thing is it is used for reconstructing history. Okay, facts, whatever you are having, it may be very much disordered, it will be scattered, so it has to be organized. That is what synthetic operations do. Third, they are started in different places, all sources. So, if you take the example of Aurangzeb, you have some sources of Maratha period. You may have some sources in the Deccan. You may have some sources in Delhi. So, it may be scattered in different places. So, the job of synthetic operations is all the facts should be relevant and they have to be sorted, organized, so that you can write and utilize the paper, the historical paper better. Okay. So, what is the difference between synthetic and analytical operations? Analytical operations, as I said earlier, it was checking the validity of all your sources. So, that is the first step where you are checking if the document is genuine or not. But synthetic is you already have all the facts with you, you already have all the sources with you, you're only going to organize them. Next, analytical operations is very scientific. So, whether you are employing external criticism or internal criticism, you will go in a methodology. You will ask questions, you will reason. All that is part of analytical operations. But synthetic is mostly artistic because you're using imagination to organize and to sort all your facts. You're writing a story, you're writing a thesis. So you will start thinking, finding a mental imagination, see what facts to be added. So you're using a lot of mental imagination. So it is artistic. There are no rigid rules here. Okay. So let us see what are the tasks of synthetic operation. So as told earlier, material is there. It will be very disorderly. It is scattered everywhere. It has to be sorted and grouped correctly. So all of the data should be arranged to form a whole story. Okay. What data is isolated? Like not all data will be connected. For example, the all the Maratha data you can connect in the case of Aurangzeb, but you may have some isolated facts. Could be about Aurangzeb's daughter or Aurangzeb's campaign with Bahmani sultans, which may not be fitting your research, but they are still facts about Aurangzeb. So you can make a decision whether you want to join them to form a structure for your thesis, whether you want to use them or not use them. All these things you can think and apply during your synthetic operations. So, what are the general principles of synthetic operations? You have to group the facts, you have to explain each fact's importance, and you have to try to make it into a story or a narrative so that it adds meaning. You can't randomly add all Aurangzeb for your research. If your story is about Aurangzeb's relationship with Marathas, you'll only take the facts which is necessary for your research. Okay, so you won't be taking random or isolated facts which has nothing to do with Marathas. Okay, so you have to bring unity in whatever narrative you are writing. So, points to note. So, once again, there will be a lot of facts. So, some facts may be belonging to one time period. For example, 17th century facts may be there, 18th century facts may be there, or the fact may belong to a particular country. In our case of Aurangzeb, some may belong to Delhi, some may belong to Maharashtra, some may belong to down south, Karnataka. So, each fact has to be localized and grouped correctly. Okay. So, what are the types of sources you have or informations that you have? It is first one is materials. Materials can be monuments, inscriptions, all that. Or you can have information about men, or their achievements, their wars they fought, or their deeds. These are all type of information or facts that you have. Or it could be even be motives. What made Aurangzeb fight Shivaji? What made Aurangzeb not trust Rajputs like Akbar? So these are motives. So all this is information only. Okay. Let's see what are the two steps for synthetic operation. One is grouping, okay. One is reasoning. Let's take a look into both of this. Grouping. So this is a picture of all nuts. Here you are trying to group each of them into their own. This one, like there is almonds. Almonds are collected, and they are grouped into almond category. Then you have walnuts. walnuts are grouped into another category. Okay, and then you have dry dates. So similarly, in grouping, we try to group them together. Let's see how. So grouping facts. So why should you group the facts? So when there is, as a researcher or as a historian, when you have lot of data, it can be very confusing. So in the case of Aurangzeb's, only if you take the example, there will be some information about Marathas, there will be some information about Deccan, there will be information about Wadairs and Aurangzeb. So there is a lot of data. So if when you start grouping and sorting data, it will kind of make your uh, writing easier. It will limit your field of research. You will okay, I'm only going to use Maratha data, and I'm only going to use Maratha and Deccan data. So when you start grouping them, your research becomes much more simpler, and you get a concrete way of writing your thesis or paper. So, how do you group facts? You can group the facts according to time period. When you say time, it means ancient, medieval, modern. Okay, or you can group them according to place, geographical. That is Delhi, Maraga, Deccan, or Karnataka, or Mysore, or Maharashtra, or England and France. So it's depending on place. Or you can also group them according to person. For example, maybe you have information about Napoleon or Hitler for your particular research. You'll start grouping them according to generals or officers, something like that. So your grouping can be done in any way, whatever you find comfortable, and or whatever you find is required for your research. So either you can arrange them according to chronology. Chronology means time period, or you can also arrange them according to geography, that is a place. So let us take a sample plan. Let's say I want to talk about this is an example from the book written by Sheikh Ali, where he takes let us suppose that you have essential features of Vijayanagara culture is your research topic. So a sample grouping would be could be material. What is material? For essential features of Vijayanagara culture, material could be weather, climate, rivers, hills, um, or demography like number, age of male or female, births, deaths, and all. So you can group all the data of weather, climate, rivers, hills, etc. in material category. Okay, intellectual. What is intellectual? Intellectual means ideas. So you can write about, I mean, you can group all the growth of man's mind in language, science, music, religion. All this can be whatever facts you get about philosophy, morals, all that can be grouped under an intellectual category. Okay. Economic. What is economic? It could be agriculture, trade, transport, land revenues, income, expenditure during Vijayanagara era. So all the data that you get about fields, agriculture, or trade, you can group them under economic conditions category. What about institutions? Similarly, suppose public institutions, let's say, there may be about administration, there could be about political reforms, there could be about war or peace. All that can be grouped under public institutions. What about social institutions? Maybe Vijayanagara period had a different set of family, customs, manners, festivals, food. So all that will be grouped into under social category. So what are you trying to do? This is a sample plan. Okay. So you can get all the sources which you require for Vijayanagara period. And suppose if you are writing about features of Vijayanagara period, you can either group your all the facts into material or intellectual or economic or institutions, or you can combine all of them together. Okay. You can use single or combination. That will depend on the nature of your subject, or your own likes and dislikes, or the people whom you are writing for, your readers. Okay, so you can group anyhow you want, but it has to be intelligent arrangement. The second step of synthetic operations is reasoning. What is the reasoning? As this picture shows, you are trying to fill a gap. Okay, that is what reasoning does. Let us learn more about this. So, what is constructive reasoning? It is a second activity in synthetic operations. It is trying to fill the gap. So, all you may have collected a lot of sources, but still there may be something which is unknown. You may not have data on a particular time period or a particular person. So, that is where you will try to use constructive reasoning. You will try to use deductive logic. Okay, and one last point on constructive reasoning is you should use this with caution. Okay, only when there is nothing, no other, no other solution for you, you have to use this. So what are the points? By trying to do constructive reasoning, you should not introduce anything from outside. So let us say you have a list of sources and something is missing. So just because you want to fill up a particular time period, you can't bring something else from outside and try to fill it up. Okay, you cannot use unconscious reasoning. See, suppose you are writing about Aurangzeb, you already have a particular like or dislike about Aurangzeb. So just because you do not know about a particular data, you may not, maybe Aurangzeb, you do not have data about Aurangzeb and religion or Hindu religion. So just because you feel Aurangzeb was, conservative, uh, you cannot simply write that he was not tolerant with Hindu religion. Okay, so unconscious reasoning or bias is not allowed in constructive reasoning. If there is any doubt, you should stop your reasoning. You can't fill a gap just because you're not very sure of the this one, okay, of the fact. No invention or fabrication should be done. So let's see, two types of constructive reasoning is there. One is positive, one is negative. First, let us look into negative reasoning. So negative reasoning means argument of silence. What does this mean? It means, suppose there is a guest in your house, okay, and you ask him, "Will you stay for tomorrow?" The guest does not say anything. Atiti will keep his mouth shut. So you can assume that he probably wants to stay. Okay. So this is an argument of silence. He wants to stay, but he is probably shy. If he didn't want to stay, he would have definitely said, "I will go home. No, no, I already have booked my tickets." Something like that. So negative reasoning means you have all the facts, but and because the facts are pointing to a delicate issue, you say you can use negative reasoning. For example, uh, let's say uh, it cannot be used for all. For example, if during medieval period in England there was a lot of popular assemblies, but in France at the same time there was no popular assemblies. Okay, so the historians of the during that period, for example, Gregory de Tours, um, has written a lot about that period, and he was a very confident historian. So, because he does not mention anything about assemblies in popular assemblies in France, and because he is silent on this point, we can conclude that, or we can infer that France did not have the same type of government as England. So this is an argument of silence because the author Gregory can be trusted. He was a sound historian, and because he has not mentioned about the popular assemblies uh, of France during medieval period, though England had it, we can assume that there were no assemblies in France. So this is something which is coming due to argument of silence because the historian has not recorded anything about institutions or popular assemblies. Therefore, France did not have such institutions. So this is an argument of silence. But remember, negative reasoning should be used with a lot of caution. All facts should have been observed, recorded, and preserved. You should remember that you can't use argument of silence for everything. Just because an author is silent does not mean so and so fact could be true. Okay. Or you should remember that all facts should have been observed, recorded, and preserved. Nothing should have been lost. Okay, and it cannot be used for all cases. For example, if there was a serious flood in a particular place, everybody will know it. But if there was some conspiracy, not everybody will know it. Just because not everybody knows it and it has not been recorded does not mean that there is any, but that does not mean there was no conspiracy. Okay, so you should remember that if the facts were of general nature, like a war or a battle or a flood, everybody will know. But if the fact was top political secret, it may not have been preserved or recorded. So that does not mean it was not there. Okay, political secrets are generally never recorded, or it will not be known to a common person. So just because a common person or a historian is not having access to that political cabinet secrets does not mean there was no conspiracy during any particular time period. So you should see what facts we are talking about. For example, if there's a war, everybody will know it. If it is a general, he'll be the right person to write about the war. But if it's a common man, obviously the facts will still have some disorientation or misrepresentation. Okay, but if it was a political secret, only a cabinet person will know the secret, not everybody will know. So you should figure out who is the author, whether he has observed all the facts, whether he has recorded all the facts. Only then you can use negative reasoning. Okay, now let us take the positive reasoning. This is much more useful. It is drawn from analogy, and here there is past versus present. So positive reasoning means, uh, see, in history, all events are connected. Okay, suppose something happens today, it is connected with yesterday. So this is what positive reasoning uses. Analogy it uses. How? Let me take an example. Okay, for example, in a particular time period, for example, in the 19th century, in Mysore state, you may know economic conditions, social conditions during the Wadair rule. You know that in the 19th century, the Wadair rule was very stable, or it could be economically prosperous and all that. But suppose, let's say, you have no fact about religious toleration in Wadair's rule. So, in such a case, because the economic condition and all others are stable and prosperous, that means there should be toleration in religion also. If there was a lot of intoleration, obviously the trade would have suffered. There would be no peace in the kingdom. Economic prosperity is not possible. So, this is a reasoning which you are employing. Just because there is no mention of religious toleration in the Wadair rule, but in looking into other facts, maybe kind of economic prosperity, and food customs, and seeing their administration, you may figure out that probably there was religious toleration as well. So this gap on religion can be filled using this kind of reasoning. Okay, so in this case, you should remember that generally it should be true, the proposition that what you are trying to do in positive reasoning is you are trying to draw an analogy. You are seeing what is a general fact, then you are seeing what you don't know, and you are trying to correlate. So, for example, let us say there is a custom existing today, which is a similar custom which existed 200 years back. Maybe there was ancestor worship. For example, in South Canada, you have ancestor worship. So why they worship on certain days and they give certain food for ancestor worship in South Canada, Kasargod and Mangalore and all. So you may not know all the details of 18th century ancestor worship, but taking a look into 20th century ancestor worship, there may be some similarities or there may be some event, and you can try to fill up the gaps of the 19th or the 18th century ancestor worship, saying that okay, this might have happened because even today this is happening, something like that. So positive reason can be employed only if you know the general proposition is true, you know all the facts about ancestral worship, and you are trying to connect for one period to another period. Okay, so likely questions. on this chapter would be what is synthetic operations, write a note on constructive reasoning, and give the importance of grouping of facts. So, thank you. And next slide, we will be learning about generalization.